Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today we're already back with What If Goku Landed on Namek Part 4, because you guys absolutely destroyed the like goal within the first 2 days, and currently we're almost at 400 likes on that video. So because of all that, I think that the like goal for me to start Part 5 will be 400 likes. I'm sure we can do it, so let's just start with the recap of the last part and get you guys going with this. And of course, the playlist to the series will either be in the description or the comments, or both. But anyway, in Part 4, everyone ended up on Earth and trained with each other with the guidance of Kami and Popo. They then used the Hyperbolic Time Chamber and used the Dragon Balls to find Frieza was on planet Kanassa and quickly headed there. Upon arrival, they split up into two groups. One, the ones who want to save the Kanassans, and the ones who want to take down Frieza. This resulted in Frieza using his final form, and it seems like no one could beat him. But now, of course, we can test that theory. So yeah guys, 400 likes on this video and I'll start on Part 5. But before we begin, as always, be sure to join my Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links in the description. So, we're heading back to the story. Frieza is casually bodying Vegeta and Nail, who now have the aid of Raditz, Nappa, and 16, but it is not enough. He's easily slapping all of them away, and meanwhile, Kakarot and his crew are heading toward the fight. Vegeta realizes there's only one thing left to do, and so he sacrifices a little bit of his energy to create a Power Ball. And so, he, Nappa, and Raditz all transform, beginning to crush Frieza. However, the Emperor of the Universe was not done. Over time, he begins powering up further, and eventually he's able to knock Vegeta off of him. But as that's happening, Kakarot and the others are flying toward them, and Kakarot sees the three Uzarus. You guys may remember back in Part 2, that Vegeta made sure Kakarot didn't know of the Uzaru form, as he thought if he used it, Vegeta himself would never catch up. As they approach, Kakarot sees their tails moving around frantically, and he grabs his own, wondering if this is what its purpose was. He then looks at the Power Ball accidentally and begins transforming. He is not able to control this form, and so he begins crashing into Vegeta, and Frieza flies back to watch. Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz were all battling to get Kakarot his sanity back, as they knew that they couldn't win without it. And eventually, Vegeta manages to barely pin him and scream in his face, "Kakarot!" Kakarot's eyes then deepen, and his facial expression changes as he shoves Vegeta off of him. He then yelled to attack, and Frieza immediately had fear and shock in his eyes before he was grabbed by Kakarot. Meanwhile, Yamcha asked how Goku would get his clothes back if he didn't stay in this transformation, and Nail replies that he's got him covered, holding up his finger. In the end, the four Uzarus would overpower Frieza once more, but eventually, he would power up to a fourth of his true potential, easily batting them all away. He then began severing their tails, Vegeta first, and then Kakarot. He then took out Raditz and Nappa's, and the four Saiyans were left on the ground. Jiro, 16, Yamcha, Tao, Shen, and Trunks all rushed Frieza while Nail stood back to help Kakarot up. He then aimed his finger at Kakarot and fired a small beam, and suddenly, he was wearing clothes again. Nail then told him that they had to escape this planet while they still could, and Kakarot quickly shrugged him off and stood up, facing in front. "If you're gonna stay a coward, then leave," he yelled. Nail was shocked by this and simply stood. Kakarot then talked to Vegeta about the Super Saiyan he had mentioned while they were training. Vegeta told him that it would have to be himself, as he was the Prince of all Saiyans, and Kakarot chuckled. He then told him that they needed to work together, no matter who it was. The four Saiyans stood together and charged after Frieza, making the Earthlings stop as they were all beaten down. 16 then told Jiro, as the Saiyans failed miserably against Frieza, that he had to use his last resort. Jiro stopped him, grabbing onto his shoulder, and told him that he couldn't do it. If he did, every trace of his son would be gone. But 16 turned to him and smiled. "You need to let go of the past, Doctor." Jiro began tearing up as 16 flew toward the battle, clutching his arms around Frieza. He then yelled that this was the end before detonating. Smoke filled the air, and everyone thought that it might be over, but it wasn't. Frieza still stood, unscarred. He was angered at this, and he took his rage out on Yamcha, blasting a hole in his chest. Trunks yelled out for his dad, but he was picked up by Frieza's telekinesis. Trunks shook in fear and screamed out, and the camera pans to a pair of legs running, before a blast is fired from the person's hands, elevating them. It was Nail, and he had launched himself through the sky, headbutting Trunks into the ground. Because of this, he was picked up in his place. He turned his head to Kakarot, and told him that he was sorry, before being killed in the same way Krillin was in canon. Kakarot stood as Tao rushed to grab Yamcha and fly him to the ship, but he couldn't see it. Kakarot couldn't see anything. Nothing else existed. Frieza's laughter became soundless, and the only thing heard by Kakarot was his own breathing, and then his screams. He screamed out in rage as his hair transformed, and along with his hair, his eyes, and his power, he had become a Super Saiyan. Kakarot then lunged at Frieza, slapping him around with little difficulty. However, over time, just like before, Frieza powered up to 3/4 of his maximum, beginning to body the Saiyan. Kakarot stood, breathing heavily once more, and asked why he even came to this planet. The tyrant responded that he had heard about the powers the Knassans possessed. Supposedly, they could predict the future. He wanted his fortune told, but they've made it increasingly difficult for him, so he will torture them. And so, as Kakarot continued getting beaten down, everyone else was helpless. Vegeta especially, as he realized many things about the Super Saiyan. It wasn't him. It wasn't an elite or royal Saiyan. It was Kakarot. And furthermore, the Super Saiyan isn't all-powerful either. He's out there getting bodied by Frieza with the power that was supposed to defeat him. Now, he was going to die. They were all going to die. Not even a Super Saiyan could save them. Not a legend that he had been told about his whole life. That he had been told that he would become one day and defeat Frieza. It's not him. All these realizations go to Vegeta's head, and he begins to power up. His rage is transformed into power, and he too becomes a Super Saiyan. Kakarot's face is endowed with the same shock that Vegeta had when seeing him transform, and Frieza was quickly surprised with a kick to the face. Vegeta continued rushing at the Emperor, but because his power level was only 54 million, he was also beaten down. Kakarot and Vegeta took turns attacking, but the two weren't making any progress. And so Kakarot yelled to Vegeta that the only way to win was if they worked together, as he had said before. Of course, Vegeta didn't want to comply, but Kakarot convinced him with this next line. "When we were training, you told me about the legend. But it isn't one person, Vegeta. We together are the Super Saiyan." This made Vegeta finally agree, and the two Saiyans began defeating Frieza. However, just like always, he powered up. But this time, he reached his 100% state, and even the two Super Saiyans weren't enough to win. Kakarot looked at his hands and yelled Vegeta's name. He then stretched his hand outward and yelled, "Here!" Kakarot's energy was sent directly to Vegeta as he powered down into his base. Vegeta was struck with this new power that surpassed even Frieza. And if you want to know how that's true, I suggest checking out What If Vegeta Rebelled Early Part 4, where I explain how energy transferring might work. Anyway, Vegeta felt the strength surge within him, and Frieza stepped onto Kakarot's back before blasting at Vegeta. But the powered up Super Saiyan slapped it into the ground. Frieza laughed that he was a fool, and now the planet would explode in just a few minutes. But Vegeta smirked. "That's all I need. Kakarot, I suggest you get out of here." He smiled and began flying off along with the rest of the warriors to the ship. Vegeta then began absolutely dominating Frieza. His power surpassed that of even Goku as a Super Saiyan in canon, sporting over 170 million in power level. Eventually, he charged into the air, yelling that this was where it ends, before unleashing a Gallic gun, killing the tyrant once and for all. Kakarot then spoke in Vegeta's mind, telling him that they had just barely made it, and there wouldn't be enough time for him to make it to the ship. Vegeta told him that they needed to go on without him, and that he doesn't need their ship. They then began flying back to Earth while Vegeta searched for a way out. Eventually, he saw Frieza's ship and entered it, shooting off the planet, although he could barely control it. As a month passed, Kami's ship was on Earth once again. Kakarot and the crew had finally arrived, and everyone's lives became a bit more normal. Yamcha, Bulma, and Trunks went to the new capsule corp that was built over the time they were training. The Knassans also went with them until the others could be brought back. Bulma began working on a new ship large enough for the whole population, and she finally officially got married to Yamcha. Nappa stuck to training, but also traveled around a bit, seeking more than just fighting. Raditz was similar, but he had stopped training entirely. He was too focused on trying to make amends for what he had done to Earth. He formally apologized to Yamcha and his family, and eventually found himself a love interest. I'll come back to that in a sec. Of course, we cannot forget about Kakarot. He's been training on the lookout as well as traveling around. He wants to explore this planet, as he hadn't gotten the chance to last time, since he was just training. He also finds a love interest around the Ox Kingdom. He had passed by once and met Chi-Chi. It was nothing too crazy, as they were only just together and not married. Kakarot may be smarter in this universe, but not in terms of love, cause the Namekians aren't really gonna know too much about love since they're asexual. Anyway, back to Raditz's love interest. He had met Colonel Violet. If you don't know who she is, she was a Red Ribbon Army soldier. In this universe, I would say that she survived. She's one of the few Red Ribbon members still alive at this point. For some story, I think her plane was blasted by one of King Piccolo's children, and she had crashed and decided to stop fighting the war. She saw herself as too much of a disgrace for failing, and so she stayed hidden in the jungle. However, Raditz comes across her, and the two became friends. I think since Violet was a soldier, she was probably pretty assertive and dominant, so Raditz would like that. They're only together as well, and not married. So last, we haven't talked about Dr. Gero. He has gone completely off the radar. He keeps himself in his lab because he cannot live with the fact that he was useless against Frieza, and the last of what he had of his son was now gone. None of his creations were able to help. He stood alone in isolation. As for Nail, Kami had told him about King Kai's planet, and so he went there to train. It didn't really do much for his base power level, but he was able to learn the Kaioken and the Spirit Bomb. So now we're going back to Vegeta. After taking off from Namek, he fell unconscious after using all of his energy with the Super Saiyan form. This resulted in him landing on the controls and setting it to Yardrat. The ship crashed because he didn't land it safely, and so the Yardrats had to fix it, and also heal Vegeta. He recovered over time, and quickly began training to reactivate Super Saiyan, as since he was basically 3 times weaker than Goku was in canon, it would take about a month to reawaken the form. He didn't bother learning instant transmission until after he had re-unlocked the form. So now, once again, we're going to cut back to Earth. After the 10 months have passed, everyone killed on planet Kanassa are brought back. Minus 16, of course, because he's a robot. The Kanassans prepare to leave and find a new planet, but before they go, Tulo, the Kanassan general, lets Kakarot know that they need to be wary. He had seen in a vision that a green bug monster would be their undoing. He then thanks everyone and enters the ship, leaving Earth. Kakarot and Nail meet once more, and are happy as brothers. And so, now I'm going to leave you with a poll on the community tab. Vegeta after the 10 months has learned instant transmission and regained Super Saiyan. His next mission is to defeat King Cold and his forces, but he is weary that Cold might be able to transform like Frieza. So, does he go off on his own to try and fight him? Or does he go to Earth to recruit Kakarot and defeat him together, just like Frieza? The poll will be on the community tab, and I hope that you all vote there because comments will not be counted. I also hope that you enjoyed this video and stick around for part 5. Remember that the like goal is 400 likes on this video, so let's do it, and I can bring you guys part 5 as soon as possible. But as always, like the video if you enjoyed, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.